The air was thick with the scent of battle, and the ground beneath Jack's feet trembled with the force of distant explosions. He had been dropped into the heart of enemy territory, deep within the alien stronghold, where no human had ever set foot before. His mission was clear: infiltrate, gather intel, and get out alive. But Jack wasn't expecting the turn his mission would take when he found himself face to face with the one being he feared most: Queen Nyx. The alien queen had long been a legend, powerful, ruthless, and untouchable. Her people revered her. Her enemies feared her, and Jack's mission depended on her never knowing he was there. He moved quietly, staying in the shadows, avoiding the patrols of her elite guards. But as fate would have it, his path crossed with hers. It was the sound of footsteps that first alerted him. At the far end of the grand corridor, illuminated only by the flickering light from overhead, he saw her. Queen Nyx. Her body, an intricate design of sleek, dark exoskeletons and glowing biomechanical features, seemed to shimmer in the low light. Her black hair cascaded down her back, longer than anything Jack had ever seen, and her piercing eyes scanned the surroundings with a calculating, almost otherworldly intelligence. Every step she took exuded authority. Every movement was purposeful. Jack froze. He had expected her to be formidable, but nothing could have prepared him for the sheer presence she commanded. The air itself seemed to bend around her, a sense of power that radiated from every inch of her being. The corridor was vast, stretching ahead like a forgotten cathedral, and Jack knew he had only moments to act. He stepped back into the shadows, hoping she wouldn't notice him. But as his boot scraped against the metal floor, the queen's head snapped in his direction. For a moment, everything seemed to stand still. The only sound was the rapid beating of Jack's heart. His hand instinctively went to the weapon at his side, but before he could react, Nyx spoke. "Who dares to hide in the presence of the queen?" Her voice was smooth, cold, like the quiet before a storm. Jack stood frozen, unsure of what to do, the queen's gaze fixed on him with unnerving precision, as if she could read his every thought. There was no escape. She had already seen him. Every fiber of his being screamed at him to flee, but something in her presence held him rooted to the spot. I didn't mean to intrude," Jack stammered, his voice betraying his nerves. He had faced countless enemies in battle, but none like this. None that made his blood run cold in such a way. Queen Nyx took a step forward, her movements fluid, graceful, and terrifying all at once. "You dare enter my domain, and you think an apology will save you?" Her eyes glowed a fiery amber, and Jack could feel the weight of her stare digging into his soul. Jack swallowed hard. He was in too deep now. There was no turning back. His mission had been to gather information, to learn what he could about the alien queen, but what he hadn't expected was the overwhelming pull she exuded, an intensity that gripped him tighter than any weapon ever could. "Please," Jack managed, his voice slightly steadier now. "I am here only to observe, to learn, nothing more." A flicker of something flashed in Nyx's eyes. Amusement, perhaps. She tilted her head, studying him. "Learn?" she repeated, almost as if savoring the word. "What is it you hope? To learn from a creature like me?" Jack couldn't tear his eyes away from her. She was like nothing he had ever seen, and he found himself saying something he didn't fully understand. "I want to understand you." The queen's expression shifted, but her cold demeanor didn't waver. Her gaze softened, just slightly, as if she were considering his words carefully. For a brief moment, Jack thought he saw something different in her eyes, a glimpse of something human, something vulnerable. But it was gone in an instant, replaced by her usual mask of icy control. "You wish to understand me?" Nyx's voice was barely a whisper, but it carried the weight of 1,000 secrets. "Very well. Come closer, human. I'll show you." Before Jack could respond, she moved toward him in one smooth, calculated motion. The space between them closed in an instant, and Jack found himself standing face to face with the queen. Her gaze never wavered, but something in her posture shifted. She wasn't threatening him. No, this was something different. It was as if she were testing him, searching for something within him. Her piercing gaze swept over him, reading every movement, every breath, and then, without warning, she reached out, a single gloved hand brushing his arm as if to test his presence. The moment her skin touched his, the world seemed to stop. Jack's heart pounded in his chest and he felt a strange, electric shock run through his body. It was more than just a physical touch. It was as if their souls had collided, if only for a fleeting second. The connection was undeniable, powerful, and unlike anything Jack had ever felt. Nyx stepped back, her eyes narrowing as she studied him with even greater intensity. Jack's mind raced. Had she felt it too? What was happening? The realization hit him like a thunderclap. This moment had changed everything. In the silence that followed, Jack knew one thing for certain: no alien male would ever be worthy in her eyes again, because of a single touch. But there was more to this encounter than either of them understood. As Jack's heart still raced in his chest, Nyx's eyes flickered with an emotion she had never allowed herself to feel before. And in that moment, the fate of their worlds had begun to shift. The seconds that followed felt like an eternity. Jack stood frozen in place, his mind racing as the weight of the Queen's touch still lingered on his skin. His heart pounded in, his chest not from fear but from something far more unsettling, a connection. The feeling was undeniable, and it shocked him to his core. For the briefest of moments, it was as though the boundaries between human and alien, enemy and ally, had blurred. Queen Nyx stepped back, her expression unreadable. Her cold, calculating demeanor had returned in full force, but there was a flicker of uncertainty in her amber eyes. Jack couldn't help but notice it. Something had shifted in her. He had seen it, and now he could not unsee it. He had expected her to be nothing more than a ruthless alien leader. But in that fleeting moment, he had glimpsed something else, something softer, something human. But she quickly masked it, regaining control as she straightened her posture and glared at him, her voice cutting through the silence. "Explain yourself," Nyx demanded, her voice sharp, but there was a new edge to it, something that Jack couldn't quite place. "What is it you seek by touching me, human?" Jack swallowed hard, unsure of how to respond. His mind was still reeling from the intensity of the encounter. "I didn't mean to. I was just trying to stop you from executing him." His voice sounded weak, even to him. He could feel the weight of her gaze as if she were probing his very soul. For a moment, Nyx didn't speak. She simply stared at him, her eyes narrowed, studying him with a scrutiny that felt almost invasive. Jack shifted uncomfortably under her gaze, but there was nothing he could do to break the tension. The connection between them, whatever it was undeniable. The electric charge that had passed between them had left its mark, and he feared it was more than just physical. "You think you can stop me with a touch?" Nyx finally spoke again, but this time her tone was different. It was softer, more contemplative, though still laced with authority. "You are bold, human, but I do not take kindly to being touched without permission." "I didn't mean any harm," Jack replied quickly, his voice steady, but his hands shaking ever so slightly. "It was just instinct." Nyx's gaze softened for a fraction of a second, but just as quickly her expression hardened again. Instinct? Or was it something more? Jack felt his throat tighten. He couldn't deny it. There had been something more. The moment their skin made contact, a rush of emotions flooded him. He had felt it too, the connection. He had thought it was just his imagination, but now he knew better. Something had passed between them, and the Queen had felt it as well. Jack searched her face for any sign of what she was truly thinking. Nyx turned abruptly, her cloak sweeping behind her as she walked toward the window. Her back to him, she gazed out over the battlefield, her eyes lost in thought. "Do you know what it means to be a queen?" Nyx asked, her voice almost distant. "To rule an empire, to command the respect of millions, to be the one who makes the ultimate decision on life and death? I am not just any leader. I am the one who defines the fate of my people." Jack took a step forward, his voice quieter now. "I understand that, but No, you don't. Nix interrupted, turning to face him once more. You cannot understand. You are human. You have no idea what it's like to hold that kind of power, to bear the weight of an entire race on your shoulders. You think your touch means something? It means nothing. But even as she spoke the words, Jack could see the flicker of doubt in her eyes. She was trying to convince herself as much as she was trying to convince him. Jack took another step closer. But it did mean something, didn't it? Nix's eyes hardened once more, but the tension in the room was palpable. It was a momentary weakness, she said, her voice low, almost as if she were speaking to herself. A fleeting moment that will not change anything. You will leave this place human. You will forget about this. But Jack knew it wasn't that simple. There was no way he could forget what had happened, and from the way she was acting, it was clear that Nix couldn't either. The silence stretched between them, thick and uncomfortable. Jack could feel the weight of her gaze on him, and he wondered if she could feel the same pull that he did. He couldn't be sure, but he knew one thing. Something had changed between them, and neither of them could walk away from it. Suddenly, the sound of approaching footsteps broke the silence. The Queen's guards were coming, their heavy boots echoing in the hallway. Nix stiffened, her eyes narrowing as she quickly regained her composure. I should have you executed for what you've done, Nix said coldly, but Jack could hear the tremor in her voice. You've overstepped your place. Jack braced himself for what was to come, but then, to his surprise, Nix did something unexpected. She turned away from him, walking toward the door, and then paused, looking back, over her shoulder. Her voice was barely above a whisper. Leave now, human, and remember this. No male, no alien, will ever compare to what you've caused. No one will ever be worthy of me again. The words hit Jack like a punch to the gut. Nix's rejection. Of all the other males, her alien race was more than just an act of defiance. It was a declaration. A shift in the very foundation of the empire she had worked so hard to build. And it was all because of him. As Nix left the room, Jack was left, alone, his heart still racing. He realized that the consequences of their brief encounter were far from over. The Queen had rejected her own people because of him, and in doing so, she had just set in motion a chain of events that neither of them could predict. The days that followed were tense, thick with uncertainty. Jack remained confined within the alien stronghold, but his mind wandered far beyond the walls. Nix's words echoed in his mind. No male, no alien, will ever compare to what you've caused. He couldn't understand why it had to be him. What had he done to deserve this strange, powerful connection with the Queen? As he walked through the corridors of the palace, Jack couldn't help but feel a sense of unease. The Queen, Nix, had not come to him since their fateful encounter. She had ordered her guards to keep him at a distance, only allowing him to speak with her in the presence of others. It was as though she was trying to push him away, even as she fought the invisible pull that had formed between them. Meanwhile, the alien warriors, those who once served the Queen with unquestioning loyalty, were now questioning her every decision. Nix's rejection of them, her dismissal of their power, had shaken the very foundation of their society. Their once untouchable Queen was now seen as weak, as someone who had lost control. It was a dangerous position to be in. As Jack sat in the sparse quarters provided to him, a small part of him understood the precariousness of the situation. Nix's rejection of her own kind was not just about a personal choice, it was about power, loyalty, and the fragile balance of an empire, built on strict hierarchy and order. She had defied the rules of her world by rejecting the alien males who once competed for her favor, and now, with the humans' involvement, everything had changed. Jack paced back and forth, his mind torn between duty and the pull he felt toward the Queen. Despite all that had happened, his heart still raced whenever he thought about her. He had come to this place to gather intelligence, to complete a mission, but somewhere along the way, his mission had changed. The human soldier had become the catalyst for a rebellion that could tear apart the very fabric of the alien empire. It wasn't long before Nix finally made an appearance. She entered the room without warning, her cold demeanor as sharp as ever. Her long, dark cloak swept behind her as she walked, and her eyes, usually full of intensity, were now distant, guarded. "Jack," she said, her voice formal, almost detached. "The time has come for you to leave." Jack stood up, the weight of her words settling heavily in his chest. He had expected her to say something like this. It had been inevitable. Yet hearing it aloud still stung. He had hoped for some kind of understanding, some glimmer of the bond they had shared in that moment, but Nix was not offering any of that now. "You've overstayed your welcome," Nix continued, her voice hardening with every word. "Your presence has destabilized my empire, human. My people now question my authority, my decisions. You have given them the excuse they've long been waiting for." Jack's chest tightened. He could feel the rejection in her words, the finality. It was clear she had no intention of allowing this connection to blossom further. It wasn't just about him anymore. It was about her empire, her rule, and her legacy. "I didn't mean for any of this to happen," Jack said, his voice softer. "Now, I never asked for this. I didn't ask for you to feel this way." Nix's gaze flickered to him for a brief moment, but then she quickly averted her eyes. She looked away, seemingly lost in thought, and for a moment Jack wondered if there was still a part of her that felt conflicted, that struggled with the emotions she had never allowed herself to feel. But the moment passed and the Cold Queen was back, her exterior impenetrable. "You have no place here, human," Nix said, her voice flat. "No matter what we shared in that moment, it means nothing. My people must be my priority. You are nothing more than a distraction." A sharp pain shot through Jack's chest at her words. It was as though something inside him had shattered. He had hoped for something more, for understanding, for a deeper connection. But Nix's rejection was final. Her decision was made, and there was no room for him in her world. But as Nix turned to leave, Jack found his voice again. He wasn't ready to let go, not yet. "Wait," he said, his voice trembling with urgency. "You can't just dismiss everything we've felt. We're connected now, Nix. Whether you like it or not, you can't erase what's happened between us. It was real." Nix paused at the door, her back to him. She didn't turn around, but Jack could see her shoulders tense. She was fighting something deep within. "I never asked for this connection, human," she replied coldly. "I never wanted to be weak." Jack stepped forward, his heart pounding. "You're not weak. You're stronger than you realize. You're fighting something you don't need to fight. This isn't about weakness. It's about something deeper, something human." Nix didn't answer. She simply turned and walked out, her heels clicking sharply against the floor. Jack watched her go, a sense of helplessness settling over him. The alien queen, the one who commanded entire legions, had just rejected him, and in doing so she had rejected her own emotions, her own vulnerability. She had chosen to maintain control, even if it meant denying what she truly felt. But what Jack couldn't understand was why she felt the need to push him away. Was she afraid of the feelings they shared? Did she fear what would happen if she allowed herself to let go? Or was this rejection simply a way for her to regain control over the chaos she had inadvertently unleashed? As Jack stood there staring at the door where Nix had just disappeared, he realized that this wasn't over. It couldn't be. The connection between them was too strong, and neither of them could escape it. Nix could push him away, but in doing so she was only pushing herself further into the storm of emotions she was desperately trying to suppress. The days that followed Nix's rejection were the darkest Jack had ever known. He had been kept at a distance, isolated within the cold walls of the alien stronghold, his mind unable to escape the memories of the connection he had felt with the Queen. He couldn't stop thinking about her, the way her eyes had softened when she first touched him, and how quickly that softness had vanished the moment the weight of her responsibility had settled back upon her shoulders. But Jack knew one thing he couldn't give up. Not now. Not when everything had changed. Nix had ordered him to leave, to return to his people, and yet Jack had stayed. He could feel it in his bones, a call to do something more, something bigger than just completing his mission. He had come, here to gather intel? Yes, but something inside him had shifted. There was more at stake now. His heart had been touched by the Queen's vulnerability, and he wasn't willing to walk away from that. He couldn't let her carry the burden of this alone, not when they had shared something that went beyond politics, beyond war, beyond species. As Jack sat in the dimly lit chamber, a knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. He stood up, his heart racing. His first instinct was to ignore it, to keep hiding from the world that had rejected him. But the knock came again, more insistent this time. Jack hesitated, then moved toward the door, his hand resting on the cold metal handle. When he opened the door, he was met by a familiar face. It was one of Nix's most trusted advisors, a tall, imposing alien with sleek silver-blue skin and eyes that glowed with an eerie intensity. The advisor stepped forward, his face unreadable. "Jack," he said in a low voice, "the Queen wishes to see you." The words hit Jack like a punch to the gut. He hadn't expected this. Nix had been adamant in her dismissal of him. So why now? Why had she called for him? The advisor didn't wait for Jack to respond. He turned and began to walk down the corridor, signaling for Jack to follow. With his heart pounding in his chest, Jack followed silently, his thoughts racing. The further they went, the more intense. The atmosphere seemed to grow. It felt as though the entire palace was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. When they reached the throne room, Jack found the doors wide open. The throne room, once so imposing, now felt strangely empty, almost abandoned. In the center of the room stood Nix, her back turned to him. She was still as regal as ever, her dark cloak sweeping the floor with each movement. But there was something different about her now. She stood alone, no guards, no advisors, just her, in the silence. "Nix?" Jack's voice broke the stillness, and she turned slowly to face him. Her eyes locked with his, and for a moment there was no sound but the beating of their hearts. The same pull, the same connection was still there, undeniable and powerful. "I'm sorry, Jack," Nix said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. "I've been running from this, from you, from the truth." Jack's heart skipped a beat. "You don't have to apologize, it's not your fault. I never meant to make things complicated." Nix shook her head, her gaze not leaving his. "It's more than that. You've made me see things differently, and I can't just pretend that nothing has changed. I've rejected my people, rejected everything I've ever known. I thought I could remain in control, that I could push away the emotions you awakened in me. But I can't. I've realized now that I don't want to." The confession hung in the air, thick and heavy. Jack took a step forward, his voice soft, but resolute. "You don't have to do this alone. We're in this together. Whatever happens next, we face it together." For the first time since they had met, Nix allowed herself to smile. It was a small, fragile smile, but it was the first true expression of emotion Jack had seen from her. The Queen, who had ruled with such cold authority, now seemed like someone he could relate to, someone human, in a way he hadn't expected. "I can't let you stay here," Nix said, her voice filled with resolve. "The rebellion is growing. The warriors demand my abdication, and my own people question my every move. But I cannot keep running. I can't hide anymore. It's time for me to make a decision." Jack took a deep breath, his heart racing. He had known this moment would come. He had felt it deep within him, that sense of inevitability. But now, as Nix stood before him, vulnerable yet resolute, he knew it was time for both of them to choose their futures. "I'll stand with you," Jack said, his voice steady. "I don't care about the rebellion. I don't care about anything, but you." Nix's eyes softened, and for a moment the two of them were the only people in the universe. There was no empire, no war, no expectations, just the connection they had forged, stronger than anything else. "I choose you, Jack," Nix said, her voice breaking as emotion overcame her. "I choose this connection, even if it means defying everything I've ever known. I choose to be human." With that, Nyx reached out, her gloved hand brushing Jack's. It was a simple gesture, but to both of them, it meant everything. It was the beginning of something new, a new era, one that neither of them could have foreseen. "I won't let you fight this war alone," Jack said, his voice thick with emotion. "We fight together." Nyx nodded, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. Together. As the two of them stood there, hands clasped, they knew that the journey ahead would be filled with uncertainty and danger. But they also knew that whatever came next, they would face it as one, united in a bond that transcended species, that defied all the odds, the rebellion, the empire, the galaxy. They could all wait. For now, it was just them. And in that moment, that was all that mattered.